congratulations. You've just become a pirate captain in the Golden Age of Piracy. You command a ship, a crew of desperate men, and absolutely nothing else. No country backing you, no laws protecting you, no safety net if things go wrong. You're an outlaw on the high seas, and your survival depends entirely on your ability to take what you need from others while avoiding the noose that's waiting for every pirate eventually caught. But you're not just any pirate. You're reckless, dangerously so. You take risks that make your crew nervous and your enemies confused. You attack ships twice your size because they won't expect it. You sail into storms as shortcuts. You raid ports that should be impossible to raid. Your crew thinks you're either brilliant or insane, probably both, but they follow you because somehow, against all logic and probability, your crazy plans keep working, until they don't. But you'll worry about that when it happens. Welcome to the reckless life of a pirate captain. It's going to be violent, chaotic, surprisingly democratic, and probably shorter than you'd like. But it's going to be one hell of a ride while it lasts. Becoming captain, democracy and mutiny. Unlike the rigid hierarchies of naval vessels or merchant ships, pirate ships operated on surprisingly democratic principles that would seem radical even by modern standards. Captains weren't appointed by distant authorities or inherited through bloodlines. They were elected by the crew. Every man had a vote. Every man had a say. This wasn't idealism, but practical necessity. A crew that didn't want to follow their captain would simply vote him out, or, if he refused to step down, throw him overboard and elect someone new. The election process was straightforward and brutal in its honesty. When a captain position opened, through death, retirement, or removal, any crew member could put himself forward as candidate. Each candidate would make his case. What's his experience? What raids has he led? What's his plan for making everyone rich? How does he handle violence? What's his attitude toward risk? The crew would discuss, argue, sometimes fight, and eventually vote. Simple majority won. The new captain took command immediately. This democratic system created interesting dynamic. A captain had authority to command during action, in combat, during chase, while raiding. His word was absolute law that had to be followed instantly. But outside action, his power was limited. Major decisions required crew vote. Where to sail? Vote. Which ship to attack? Vote. How to divide treasure? Vote. The captain was elected leader, not absolute monarch. He served at pleasure of the crew and could be removed at any moment if he lost their confidence. The constant threat of removal kept captains honest and effective. A captain who was cruel without reason, cowardly during action, or incompetent at finding prizes wouldn't last long. The crew would vote him out and elect someone better. This wasn't theoretical threat. It happened regularly. Pirate crews were remarkably willing to remove captains who weren't delivering results or were making life unnecessarily miserable. Democracy wasn't about rights or philosophy. It was about survival and profit. Everyone needed competent leadership, so everyone got a vote in choosing that leadership. But becoming captain required more than just winning election. It required establishing credibility that made crew willing to follow you into extremely dangerous situations. This credibility usually came from demonstrated competence, successful raids led, clever tactics employed, courage shown in combat, skill at navigation or seamanship. A man who'd proven himself capable and lucky had good chance at captaincy. A man with just ambition but no track record would be ignored or mocked. William, experienced sailor who'd served on merchant vessels before turning pirate, put himself forward for captain after previous captain died in botched raid. His pitch was practical. I know navigation. I know which routes the merchants take. I know how to avoid the navy. I know how to take ships without losing half our crew doing it. Vote for me, and we'll all get rich and maybe live long enough to spend it. The crew voted him captain. His first raid was successful. His second raid was successful. He remained captain for 3 years, a long tenure in piracy, until fever took him in Tortuga. The crew mourned genuinely because competent captains were rare and valuable. Look at the articles. Pirate law and order. Every pirate ship operated under written articles, a code of conduct that all crew members signed or marked with X if illiterate. These articles weren't suggestions but binding rules with specified punishments for violations. Breaking the articles could result in marooning, flogging, or death depending on severity of offense. The democratic nature of piracy extended to these rules. The articles were typically voted on by the crew and could be amended by a majority vote if circumstances required. The articles covered everything necessary for ship operation and crew cohesion. Division of treasure was specified precisely. Captain typically received 1.5 or 2 shares. Officers received 1.25 shares. Regular crew received 1 share each. The exact ratios varied by ship and were subject to negotiation and vote, but the principle of equitable distribution was universal. No one person could claim disproportionate amount of plunder without crew agreement. Compensation for injuries sustained in action was detailed explicitly. Loss of right arm might bring payment of 600 pieces of 8. Loss of left arm, 500. Loss of right leg, 500. Loss of left leg, 400. Loss of eye, 100. The amounts varied between ships, but the principle was consistent. Men injured in service to the crew deserved compensation from common fund. This was early form of disability insurance, created by men who understood that piracy was dangerous and that injury was always possible. A man who lost a limb fighting for the crew shouldn't be abandoned to poverty. Fighting among crew members was typically prohibited or heavily restricted by the articles. A ship where crew members were killing each other over gambling debts or personal disputes couldn't function effectively. Disputes had to be settled through designated methods, often formal duels on shore at next port stop, with witnesses and agreed-upon weapons. This channeled violence into controlled contexts that didn't endanger ship operations or create ongoing feuds that divided the crew. Desertion during battle was usually punishable by death or marooning. Cowardice during action endangered everyone and couldn't be tolerated. A man who ran when his fellows were fighting wasn't just failing himself, he was failing the crew. The articles made this clear and the punishments reflected the seriousness. However, cowardice had to be clear and proven. A man who retreated tactically or who was overwhelmed wasn't coward. A man who abandoned his post while others fought was. Women and boys aboard ship were prohibited by many ships' articles, though enforcement varied significantly, and some crews ignored this rule entirely or amended it. The reasoning was practical rather than moral. Women aboard created sexual tension and competition that could divide crews. Boys could be targets of exploitation that created protective feuds, keeping both off-ship simplified social dynamics. But this rule was broken constantly, especially by captains who did what they wanted and dared the crew to challenge them. Gambling was either prohibited entirely or restricted to certain times and stakes, depending on the ship's articles. Unrestricted gambling could lead to crew members losing their shares before ever spending them, creating resentment and debt-based conflicts. Some ships allowed gambling but limited stakes to prevent anyone from losing everything. Others banned it completely and enforced the ban with flogging. The specific rule varied, but the concern was consistent. Gambling that created broke angry crew members was dangerous to ship cohesion. Lights and candles below decks were typically required to be extinguished by certain hour, often 8 or 9 at night. This was fire prevention measure on wooden ships full of gunpowder, tar, and rope. Fire at sea was death sentence for everyone aboard. The articles reflected this reality with rules designed to minimize fire risk. Smoking below decks was similarly restricted or prohibited. These weren't arbitrary rules but survival necessities that every sailor understood. The punishment for violating articles was specified for each rule and enforced collectively. The entire crew participated in punishment. No one individual was executioner or flogger. When a man was whipped for breaking articles, multiple crew members took turns with the lash. When a man was marooned, the entire crew voted on the decision and watched as he was left on deserted island or coast with minimal supplies. The collective nature of punishment reinforced that these were crew rules, not captains' arbitrary decisions. Everyone was bound by the same code. Ship life. Cramped, dangerous, and surprisingly organized. Life aboard pirate ship was exercise in managing confined spaces, limited resources, dangerous equipment, and volatile personalities in an environment that could kill everyone instantly if anything went seriously wrong. The ship was home, workplace, and fortress simultaneously. It had to function efficiently because inefficiency at sea meant death. Despite pirates' reputation for chaos, successful pirate ships were remarkably well organized out of pure necessity. The ship's daily routine was structured around watches, periods of duty where a portion of crew was responsible for sailing the ship, maintaining lookout, and handling any situations that arose. Watches rotated regularly, typically every 4 hours, ensuring that no one was perpetually stuck with the night watches that everyone hated but someone had to do. Officers assigned watches and enforced the rotation, but the system itself was accepted as fair by the crew because everyone shared the burden equally. Maintenance was constant and essential. A ship at sea required daily work to remain seaworthy. Sails needed repair, ropes needed replacement or retarring. The deck needed holystoning, scrubbing with blocks of sandstone to prevent algae buildup that made surfaces dangerously slippery. The bilge needed pumping to remove water that constantly leaked through hull seams. Guns needed cleaning and maintenance to prevent rust that could cause misfires or explosions. Rigging needed checking for weakness or damage. This maintenance work was divided among crew based on skills and rotation. Experienced sailors handled complex rigging repairs. Men with carpentry skills worked on hull and deck repairs. Everyone participated in basic maintenance like holystoning and pumping. The work was hard, boring, and never-ending. Ships that neglected maintenance became progressively less seaworthy until they simply fell apart or sank from accumulated deterioration. Pirates who wanted to survive paid attention to maintenance even when they'd rather be drinking. Food aboard ship was notoriously terrible and got progressively worse the longer the voyage. Fresh food spoiled within days in tropical heat. After that, the diet became hardtack, rock-hard biscuits that had to be soaked or broken with tools before eating, and were often full of weevils. Salted meat that was barely recognizable as meat and tasted primarily of salt and preservation. Dried peas or beans when available. The vitamin deficiency from this diet led to scurvy, the curse of long voyages that caused teeth to fall out, wounds to reopen, and eventually death if fresh food wasn't obtained. Water aboard ship was even more problematic than food. Stored in wooden barrels, it quickly became stagnant, developed algae, and tasted foul. Pirates drank it anyway because dehydration killed faster than bad water. Beer and rum were safer alternatives when available because alcohol killed some of the harmful microorganisms that made water dangerous. This led to heavy drinking culture aboard ships that was partly necessity and partly preference. A man who was slightly drunk much of the time was just dealing with the realities of life at sea. The sleeping arrangements aboard pirate ships were minimal and uncomfortable. Most crews slept in hammocks strung below decks in whatever space was available. Hammocks had advantage of swaying with the ship's motion rather than sliding around like a bunk would, but they were cramped, provided no privacy, and became humid and foul-smelling in tropical climates. Men slept in their clothes because there was nowhere to store anything, and changing was pointless when everything was constantly damp or wet from sea spray and humidity. Disease was a constant threat aboard ships where men lived in close quarters with poor sanitation, limited fresh water for washing, and no understanding of germ theory. Any illness that affected one man could spread rapidly through entire crew. Dysentery, typhus, yellow fever, and other diseases killed more pirates than combat ever did. A crew decimated by disease couldn't effectively sail the ship, let alone fight. Smart captains tried to minimize time at sea between port stops and sought fresh water and food regularly, but disease remained an ever-present threat that could destroy a crew seemingly overnight. The ship's command structure, despite the democratic election of captain, was clearly hierarched during operations. The captain commanded overall and made tactical decisions. The quartermaster managed daily operations, supplies, and discipline. He was elected separately from captain and served as check on captain's power. The sailing master or navigator handled the ship's course and piloting. The boatswain managed the crew and maintenance. The gunner handled weapons and powder. Each position had clear responsibilities and authority within their domain. Hunting prizes. The business of piracy. Piracy was fundamentally economic activity, not random violence. The goal was acquiring wealth through taking it from others who had it. This required strategy, intelligence gathering, and tactical thinking. Random ships encountered at sea might or might not be worth attacking. Smart pirates targeted specific vessels known to carry valuable cargo and avoided ships that would be costly to take relative to their worth. Information was crucial to successful piracy. Pirates needed to know which ships were sailing when, what routes they took, what cargo they carried, how well defended they were. This information came from multiple sources: captured sailors who were interrogated about shipping schedules, informants in port towns who were paid for tips, observation of patterns in merchant traffic, and network of communication between pirate crews who shared information about profitable hunting grounds and dangerous areas where Navy presence was heavy. The decision to attack specific ship involved calculation of risk versus reward. A heavily armed merchant vessel carrying low-value bulk cargo was poor target, high risk, low reward. A lightly defended vessel carrying sugar, silk, or spices was ideal target, low risk, high reward. The absolute best targets were ships carrying treasure, gold, silver, gems, but these were rare and usually heavily protected. Most piracy involved taking more mundane cargo that could be sold in pirate-friendly ports. The chase was often prolonged affair requiring hours or even days of pursuit. Merchant vessels ran when they spotted pirate ship. Whether pirates caught them depended on relative speed of the ships, wind conditions, sailing skill, and determination of each side. Pirates had advantage of typically sailing faster, more maneuverable vessels, sloops and schooners chosen specifically for speed and agility. Merchant vessels were built for cargo capacity, not speed, and were usually slower and less nimble. But if wind conditions favored the merchant ship, or if they had substantial head start, they might escape. During chase, pirates often flew false flags to confuse their target. They might fly English flag to approach English merchant ship, then raise pirate colors at last moment, when close enough that escape was impossible. This deception was standard tactic. Conversely, when trying to avoid naval vessels, pirates would fly merchant flags and try to look like innocent traders. The flags were tools of deception, not declarations of identity. No pirate felt bound by flag they flew. It was changed based on tactical advantage of the moment. Once close enough, pirates would typically fire warning shots and signal the merchant vessel to stop and surrender. Many merchant crews, recognizing that resistance was likely futile and potentially deadly, would surrender immediately. Merchants were businessmen, not warriors. Their cargo wasn't worth their lives. If the crews surrendered peacefully, pirates often treated them relatively well, taking the cargo, perhaps some supplies, but leaving the crew alive and the ship functional enough to reach port. Dead sailors couldn't warn others about the pirates' supposed mercy when surrendering. If merchant crew chose to fight, the violence escalated quickly. Pirates would close for boarding, using grappling hooks to pull ships together, then swarming across onto the merchant vessel. The fighting was close quarters and brutal. Cutlasses, pistols, boarding axes, desperation on one side, and professional violence on the other. Most merchant crews weren't trained fighters and often broke quickly once pirates boarded. Those who resisted effectively faced overwhelming force until they were killed or surrendered. The actual taking of a ship was chaotic, violent, and terrifyingly quick. Men screaming, weapons clashing, smoke from pistol fire, blood on the decks. Pirates who excelled at this work were skilled at close-quarters violence and maintaining aggression even when wounded or exhausted. The first moments of boarding were crucial. If the merchant crew could repel the initial assault, they might save their ship. If pirates established foothold, the merchant crew usually collapsed quickly as organized resistance turned into individual survival decisions. After successfully taking a ship, the pirates had to quickly assess what they'd captured and transfer valuable cargo to their own vessel. This required organization and speed. Other ships might arrive. Naval vessels might be nearby. Weather could turn bad. The crew worked efficiently to move cargo, taking what was valuable and leaving what wasn't worth the effort. Perishable foods, water, rum, weapons, ammunition, luxury goods, anything that could be sold or used, all transferred to pirate ship. The rest was left. The fate of the captured crew varied based on their behavior and pirates' mood. Crews that surrendered immediately and cooperated were usually released with their ship and minimal supplies. Crews that fought and killed pirates often faced retaliation. Some killed, others beaten or tortured. Occasionally all killed as message to other ships that resistance had consequences. Skilled sailors, navigators, carpenters, surgeons were sometimes forcibly recruited or convinced to join the pirate crew, either through threat or through offer of share of plunder. Many pirates had started as merchant sailors who joined voluntarily or under coercion to port towns, spending plunder and temporary madness. After successful crews taking multiple prizes, pirate crews descended on port towns with pockets full of plunder and determination to spend it all as quickly as possible. The logic was simple. Pirates had no guarantee of survival to next port stop, no retirement plans, no future to save for. Money was useless at sea and dangerous to keep, as it made you target. So the rational response was to spend everything immediately on whatever pleasures were available before returning to sea or getting killed or arrested. The port towns that catered to pirates were rough, dangerous places where normal laws barely applied, and local authorities either looked the other way or actively protected pirates in exchange for cut of the spending. Tortuga was most famous, island off northern coast of Hispaniola that became legendary pirate haven, where any man could come regardless of what he'd done elsewhere. Port Royal in Jamaica before the earthquake, Nassau in the Bahamas during Golden Age. These ports survived on pirate money and protected their clientele accordingly. The taverns were the social centers where newly wealthy pirates gathered to drink, boast, gamble, fight, and make poor decisions. These weren't quiet pubs, but loud, crowded, violent establishments where fortunes were won and lost at dice tables, where fights erupted over perceived insults or cheating accusations, where pirates who'd risked death together at sea now competed for status and attention on land. The tavern owners made fortunes serving rum at marked-up prices to men who didn't care what they spent, as long as drinks kept coming. The drinking was prodigious and legendary. Men who'd survived on limited water and worse beer at sea now had access to rum in quantity. They drank to celebrate survival, to forget what they'd done to survive, to bond with crew members, to impress strangers, to numb themselves, to simply drink because they could. The levels of intoxication reached were impressive even by sailor standards. Pirates would drink until unconscious, wake up, drink more. The binges lasted days or weeks, depending on how much plunder they had and how quickly they spent it. Gambling was the fastest way to lose plunder beside drinking, and pirates excelled at both simultaneously. Dice games, card games, betting on fights, betting on almost anything that involved uncertainty. The stakes climbed as the night progressed and inhibitions dissolved. Men who'd earned 50 pieces of 8 from a successful prize could gamble it all away in a single night of bad luck and worse decisions. Some pirates lost everything they'd earned, then borrowed against future shares, creating debt before next voyage even began. One-Eye Pete, known for gambling problem that matched his drinking problem, famously gambled away his entire share of a major prize in single night at Port Royal Tavern. 1,200 pieces of 8, gone by morning. He bet on dice, lost. Bet on cards, lost. Bet on whether the drunk man in the corner would fall off his stool in the next minute. Lost that too. By sunrise, Pete was broke and hungover and had to beg his captain for advance on next voyage's share, just to buy breakfast. The crew mocked him mercilessly, but also understood because half of them had similar stories. The brothels did thriving business, serving pirates who'd been at sea for weeks or months with no female companionship. These weren't romantic encounters, but transactional relationships where pirates paid for temporary intimacy before returning to sea. The women who worked in pirate port brothels were hard, pragmatic survivors who understood their clientele's nature and took their money efficiently while providing whatever services were negotiated. Some formed ongoing relationships with particular pirates who paid well and treated them decently. Most kept it purely business and moved on when the pirates left. The temporary marriages that sometimes formed between pirates and port town women were mutually beneficial arrangements rather than romantic partnerships. A pirate might establish relationship with a woman in port town he frequented, providing her with money and gifts, treating her as wife while in port. She provided companionship, place to stay, and connection to port life. When he left on next voyage, the arrangement paused, but wasn't ended. If he returned, they resumed. If he died at sea and never returned, she'd establish similar arrangement with another pirate. These relationships were understood by both parties as temporary and transactional, but they sometimes developed genuine affection despite the mercenary foundations. The violence in port towns was constant and accepted as normal. Drunk pirates fought over perceived insults, gambling disputes, women, or just because fighting seemed like a good idea at the time. Knife fights in alleys, brawls in taverns that destroyed furniture and occasionally killed people. Duels to settle honor disputes, though pirates' version of honor was a flexible concept at best. Local authorities rarely intervened unless the violence threatened business operations or killed someone important. Dead pirates were expected cost of doing business. The local economies of these port towns depended entirely on pirate spending and collapsed when pirates stopped coming. Merchants sold supplies to pirate ships at inflated prices. Tavern owners made fortunes on rum sales. Brothel workers earned more in pirate ports than anywhere else. Blacksmiths repaired weapons. Carpenters repaired ships. Everyone in these towns was connected to piracy economy in some way, which meant everyone had interest in protecting pirates from authorities who might arrest them and end the profitable chaos. The cycle was predictable and repeated constantly. Pirates arrived with plunder. Pirates spent plunder in an orgy of drinking, gambling, fighting and whoring that lasted days or weeks. Pirates ran out of money. Pirates sobered up enough to realize they were broke. Pirates returned to sea to acquire more plunder. Repeat until death or retirement, whichever came first. Most pirates never broke this cycle because they had no ability to defer gratification or plan for futures they didn't expect to have. The logical response to likely early death was to extract maximum pleasure from present, consequences be damned. Navigation and seamanship, skill that kept you alive. Despite reputation for drunken chaos, successful pirates had to be skilled seamen and navigators. The ocean didn't care about bravado or reputation. It killed incompetent sailors efficiently and inevitably. Pirates who survived long enough to gain fame did so partly through luck, but mostly through genuine maritime skill that rivaled or exceeded that of naval or merchant sailors. Navigation in the age of sail was complex skill requiring understanding of multiple methods and tools. Dead reckoning, calculating position based on known starting point, estimated speed, time elapsed and course sailed, was fundamental technique used constantly. Every competent sailor learned to estimate speed by watching objects floating past the ship and timing their passage. The course was maintained by compass. Time was measured by sandglass or by experienced estimation. Put together, these elements allowed navigators to track approximate position, even when no landmarks were visible. Celestial navigation using sun and stars provided more accurate positioning, but required tools and knowledge that not all pirates possessed. A sextant or quadrant could measure angle between sun or specific stars and horizon, which combined with accurate time and mathematical calculations could determine latitude, how far north or south you were. Longitude, how far east or west, was much harder to calculate and required either accurate timepiece or complex lunar observations that few sailors fully understood. Most pirates relied on latitude sailing, sail to correct latitude, then sail east or west along that latitude until reaching destination. Charts and maps were valuable prizes when captured because accurate charts were expensive and hard to obtain. A pirate with good charts of Caribbean waters, African coast or Indian Ocean had enormous advantage over pirates relying on memory or inferior maps. Charts showed coastlines, harbors, navigational hazards like reefs and shoals, depth soundings indicating where water was deep enough for ships, and sometimes notes about currents and winds. Captured charts from naval or merchant vessels were often more accurate than anything pirates could produce themselves. Reading the weather and understanding wind patterns was survival skill every pirate needed. The trade winds that blew consistently from east to west in tropical regions determined viable sailing routes. The hurricane season in Caribbean and Atlantic created periods of high danger when smart pirates stayed in port or sailed to less dangerous waters. The ability to read signs of approaching storms, changing cloud patterns, shifting winds, barometric pressure changes that could be felt even without instruments, meant the difference between seeking shelter and being caught at sea in deadly weather. Handling a sailing vessel required crew coordination and skill that took years to develop, setting or taking in sails quickly in response to changing conditions. Tacking, turning the ship to sail against the wind by zigzagging, required precise timing of sail adjustments and wheel or tiller movements. Wearing ship, turning away from wind, was easier but took more time and space. In combat or chase, the ability to maneuver effectively often determined outcome more than weapons or courage. A well-handled ship could escape superior force or catch inferior prey through superior seamanship. The maintenance knowledge required to keep ship functional was extensive. Understanding which repairs were urgent versus which could wait. Knowing how to splice rope, tar rigging to protect it from rot, caulk seams to prevent leaking, repair torn sails, replace damaged spars or masts. Some of this work required specialized craftsmen, but all sailors needed basic competence at emergency repairs because damage at sea couldn't wait for port. A ship that lost rigging or sails in storm had to be repaired immediately with whatever materials were aboard, or the ship and crew were lost. Neto, the reckless captain, Mad Jack's philosophy. Not all pirate captains were reckless, but the ones who became legendary often were. Calculated risk-taking was one thing. Every pirate took calculated risks because piracy itself was risky business. But some captains transcended calculation and operated on combination of courage, insanity, and faith in their own luck that terrified and inspired their crews simultaneously. These were the captains about whom stories were told long after they died, usually violently. Mad Jack, nobody remembered or cared about his last name, earned his nickname through series of increasingly insane decisions that somehow kept working until they eventually didn't. His philosophy, expressed during drunken tavern speeches, was simple. The thing they don't expect is the thing that works, and they never expect the absolutely insane thing because who would do that? We would. That's why we win. Jack's first legendary act as captain was attacking the governor's residence during the governor's birthday party. Every pirate in the Caribbean knew the governor would be there. Every pirate knew the residence would be full of wealthy merchants and officials. Every pirate also knew it would be insane to raid because guards would be everywhere, and the Navy would hunt down anyone who tried it. Jack heard this and thought, perfect. They won't expect anyone to be that stupid. He raided it, stole gifts meant for the governor, drank the governor's wine, left before guards could organize effective response. The story spread instantly. His crew's reaction to these plans followed predictable pattern. Initial proposal met with stunned silence. Then arguments about why it was suicide. Then Jack explaining why that's exactly why it would work. Then crew voting to do it anyway because the alternatives were boring and potentially no safer. Then the plan working despite everything suggesting it shouldn't. Then celebrating survival and success while planning next insanity. The cycle repeated until eventually it didn't. But that was future problem. Jack's second legendary decision was sailing directly into major storm as shortcut to ambush point. The storm was visible. Everyone could see it. The normal response was to avoid it or ride it out in safe harbor. Jack's response was, yes, but if we sail through it, we'll get there 2 days faster, and they won't expect us because no one sails through storms voluntarily. His crew thought he'd lost his mind. He probably had. But they sailed into the storm, survived through combination of skill and miracle, arrived before their target, and took a rich prize that was completely unprepared for pirates appearing out of a storm. Jack's reputation grew. The philosophy extended beyond tactics to Jack's general approach to piracy. He didn't meticulously plan. He identified opportunity, made quick decision, and committed completely. His crew learned to adapt because hesitation during Jack's plans got you killed. You followed orders instantly and improvised frantically when the inevitable complications arose. This created crew that was exceptionally good at chaos, at adapting to unexpected situations, at functioning effectively when plans fell apart, which they often did. Jack's attitude toward risk was shaped by clear understanding of pirate life expectancy. We're all going to die probably soon and probably badly. The disease will get us, or the navy will hang us, or another pirate will kill us, or we'll drown in a storm, or something else will end us. Given that death is guaranteed and probably imminent, why would I die carefully? I'm going to die doing something so spectacular that people tell stories about it afterward. You can die boring if you want. I won't. This nihilistic acceptance of mortality freed Jack from normal concerns that constrained other captains. Fear of death, pointless because death was certain. Fear of failure, pointless because even success was temporary. Fear of consequences, pointless because life as pirate was already one long consequence. The only thing that mattered was the next prize, the next adventure, the next insane decision that would either work spectacularly or fail catastrophically. Either way, it wouldn't be boring. His crew's loyalty came not from love. Jack wasn't particularly lovable, but from recognition that sailing with him was never dull and often profitable. The crazy plans worked often enough to make the crew wealthy by pirate standards. The times plans failed. Somehow most of them survived through combination of Jack's quick thinking in crisis and the crew's competence at violent chaos. They'd signed up for piracy expecting danger. Jack delivered danger plus excitement, plus unusually good success rate given the insanity of his methods. The endgame. When luck runs out, every pirate understood that the profession had three possible endings: death in combat or from disease, capture and execution, or retirement if you were lucky and smart enough to quit while ahead. The statistics heavily favored the first two outcomes. Most pirates died at sea or on the gallows. Retirement was rare because it required accumulating enough wealth to live comfortably, having somewhere to go where you weren't wanted for piracy, and having discipline to actually quit rather than taking just one more prize that turned out to be the last. The execution rate for captured pirates was remarkably high. Piracy was considered serious crime against commerce and order, and authorities hanged pirates publicly as deterrent to others. The trial, if there was one, was usually formality. The evidence was overwhelming. Captured aboard pirate vessel, usually with stolen goods aboard, often with victims who could testify. The sentence was predetermined. Hanging at public execution dock, with crowd watching as warning and entertainment. Some pirates face execution with famous last words or defiant gestures that became part of pirate mythology. These final moments of bravado were sometimes genuine courage, sometimes performance for the crowd, sometimes just desire to leave memorable legacy. But behind the swagger, most were terrified of the rope and the slow strangulation of hanging. The condemned rarely died instantly from broken neck. Most strangled slowly over minutes as they struggled. It was not pleasant death, and no amount of bravado changed that reality. The lucky ones who managed to retire faced different challenge, transitioning from pirate life to something resembling normal civilian existence. This was harder than it sounded. Many pirates had no skills beyond sailing and violence. They had no legitimate employment history. They were wanted men in most ports. They'd grown accustomed to easy money from piracy and found legitimate work boring and poorly paid by comparison. The temptation to return to piracy was constant, and many retired pirates did return for one last job that ended their retirement and often their lives. A few pirates successfully transitioned to legitimate life, or at least life that appeared legitimate. Some became merchants using their maritime knowledge and accumulated capital. Some obtained pardons in exchange for information or service. Some simply disappeared to remote locations where nobody knew their history or cared. These success stories were rare enough to be notable when they happened. Mad Jack's end, when it came, was predictably insane. He decided to attack a Spanish galleon that was obviously too well armed and defended to be a viable target. His crew argued against it. Jack insisted because, imagine if we actually take it. Nobody has ever taken one that heavily defended. We'll be legends. The crew, trained to follow Jack's insane plans, voted to attempt it despite their doubts. The attack failed catastrophically. The galleon's crew was too numerous, too well armed, too prepared. Jack died fighting on the galleon's deck, killed by multiple musket balls and cutlass wounds. Half his crew died with him. The survivors were captured and hanged within the month, but Jack got what he wanted. His death became a story that spread through every pirate port in the Caribbean. Did you hear about Mad Jack? Attacked a Spanish galleon with half the men he needed. Nearly took it too before they killed him. The story grew in telling. By some accounts, Jack had nearly defeated the entire Spanish crew single-handedly before being overwhelmed by numbers. By other accounts, he was laughing as he died. The truth was probably more mundane, but the legend served Jack's philosophy. Die spectacularly, and people remember you. The survivors of Jack's crew who didn't hang had to elect new captain. They chose Thomas, Jack's quartermaster, who'd survived the galleon disaster by being slightly more cautious than Jack. Thomas's first speech to the crew was pragmatic. Jack was brilliant and insane and got half of us killed. We're going to be slightly less insane. Only slightly. We're still pirates. The crew appreciated the balance. They'd learned from Jack that aggressive risk-taking could be profitable. They'd also learned that every eventually runs out if you push it far enough. The trick was recognizing the difference between calculated recklessness and suicide, a distinction Jack had failed to maintain. Conclusion: the pirate's bargain. Being a pirate meant making fundamental bargain with fate, freedom and potential wealth in exchange for constant danger, social isolation, and probable early death. For some, the bargain was worthwhile. The alternative was poverty as merchant sailor or laborer, marginally better survival odds but guaranteed hardship, and no chance of significant wealth. Piracy offered slim chance of getting rich and certain chance of adventure, danger, and living by your own rules rather than society's. The democratic nature of pirate ships, the elections, the articles, the equal shares, created unusual social structure where men who were outcasts and criminals in normal society formed their own functional communities with rules they chose and leaders they elected. This wasn't idealistic political philosophy, but practical solution to the problem of organizing violent, independent-minded men for collective action. It worked because everyone's survival depended on cooperation, and everyone had stake in success. The reckless captains like Mad Jack represented piracy's essence, concentrated to almost pure form, rejection of normal caution and consequences, embrace of risk and violence, focus on immediate reward rather than long-term planning, acceptance of likely bad ending in exchange for spectacular living. Not all pirates were reckless, but the spirit of recklessness ran through the profession. Careful, cautious men rarely became pirates. Those who did weren't remembered. The modern fascination with pirates comes partly from romanticizing their freedom and adventure while ignoring the hunger, disease, violence, and fear. But there's something genuinely compelling about men who chose danger and autonomy over safety and servitude, who created democratic societies aboard their ships while terrorizing merchant vessels, who died young but lived intensely according to their own rules. The reality was grimmer than the romance, but it wasn't entirely romance. Some of those men really did live exactly as free and recklessly as the legends suggest, at least until the inevitable ending caught up with them. Thank you for joining this exploration of what it meant to be a pirate captain, the democracy and dictatorship, the strategy and recklessness, the brotherhood and betrayal, the freedom and doom. If you enjoyed this look at piracy beyond treasure maps and parrots, subscribe for more historical deep dives that show the past as it actually was, violent, chaotic, occasionally magnificent, and never quite what the sanitized versions suggest. There are many more true stories waiting to be told. Let's continue exploring together.